I'm a little shorter than the previous moderator. Good morning. I'm Pamela Gorman. I'm a state senator in Arizona, and I'm moderating your panel this morning. We have three terrific people to present for you today. At least two of them were listed as criminals at the last UN meeting, and some materials are handed out. What are they, criminals of climatology? I don't know what it was. Some dubious title, and I feel disappointed that I'm not bad enough to be that good. So maybe someday I can rise to that level. Before we get started, I have an announcement. If there's a Douglas bar here, your cell phone is at the registration desk. And we have uploaded all your photos to Facebook, so you can now pick up your phone. I lost my cell phone last night, and I was really glad I had a password on mine. Okay, we're going to get started. We're going to go in this order. We're going to do first Marc Morano. He is the communications director for the United States Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works. And he has a title that is different than what is reflected in your book. The new title of what he's going to be speaking about today is Despite Consensus and Freefall, New Congress is Offering Non-Solutions to Non-Existent Problems. I won't make a comment about what they normally do. Chris Horner will be up next. He's a senior fellow with Competitive Enterprise Institute, and his speech today will be titled Rewriting the Rules for Kyoto 2, Turning a Treaty into a Congressional Executive Agreement. And last up will be Myron Ebel, Director of Energy and Global Warming Policy, also with Competitive Enterprise Institute. And he'll be speaking today on prospects for energy rationing. It's not as grim as it looks. Thank you. And I'm not going to give much longer bios. They are in the book, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Pamela. My name is... Set up. My name is Marc Morano of the U.S. Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, the minority staff. I work for Senator Inhofe, who's been, even before I got there, the biggest champion. He's the Vaclav Klaus of the United States, if you're not familiar with James Inhofe, which I think is the highest compliment, or Vaclav Klaus is the James Inhofe of Europe, however you want to put it. James Inhofe has been at this battle for years. I joined the committee in 2006. And just in that little amount of time, it is absolutely astounding what has occurred. Despite what you read in the New York Times today by Andrew Revkin's article, which just essentially tried to pour cold water on what the reality is happening here. We issued our Senate report of 400 plus scientists in 2007. This year, actually late last year, 2008, we came out with 650 scientists. And now we have another, anywhere from 30 to 50. I can't even keep up with them. We're getting about 2 a week on average from all over the world. Czech Republic, Italy, South America, South Africa. They just keep coming out. The more scientists speak out on this, the more there's other scientists, many of them prominent, senior. I think even one's in this room who spoke out for the first time against James Hansen, one of his former supervisors, John Theon. I don't know, is John in the room here, John Theon? There he is over there. He just spoke out. This year, 2009, we're finding across the board that scientists are basically saying that Dr. Pachauri of the UN has forced them to come out because he calls them flat earthers. We're finding that scientists like Robert Dernberg, a climatologist, has come out because of the science presentation of Al Gore. So in many ways, the greatest gift skeptics have had is the United Nations and Al Gore. So the more they talk, the better off we are. I've always argued, rather than censoring or trying to silence James Hansen, the more he talks, the better skeptics are, because he's increasingly leaving the reservation. He has been now talking about coal trains, and I'll show you all that here. Okay, we'll start with a quick, well, not too quick, but it's a PowerPoint. And I think you'll get, there's a mix of science, and then we'll get into the policy here. That's Senator Inhofe. Our website, by the way, shut down the entire United States Senate website because of our global warming blog. And it actually got an award from the Harvard School of Government and the National Science Foundation, an award made possible by those organizations for one of the best of the best websites. And you can imagine how that upset people. The JFK School of Government giving Senator Inhofe an award for essentially a website devoted to giving balance to the global warming debate. Just going to start here with this quote here to tell you what's going on. The science is amazing right now. As the real world fails to cooperate, the predictions get more and more dire. This is a quote. Richard Lindzen, who obviously spoke, looked at the data. Basically, nothing significant since 95, no warming since 98, flat line since 2001, cooling in recent years. 2007, the UK Met Office conceded global warming had stopped. But they predicted it would begin in earnest in 2009 because CO2 would overtake natural variability. That's 2007. And this was David G. This was at the, they called it the Olympic event for geologists last summer. 2/3 of the presenters were estimated to be skeptical and hostile to the UN. He asked that question, how many years does the planet have to cool before we realize it's not warming? April 2008, 1 year after the UK Met Office, global warming will stop until at least 2015. Okay, we're 6 years past the UK Met Office. So let's get that. 2007, it was supposed to start in 2009, 2008. They're now predicting 2015. So now, what are they saying in 2009? This is shocking. Another peer-reviewed study, March 2009, it may stop for up to 30 years. The lead author says the trend could continue for up to 30 years. They can't explain the cooling. They can't explain the lack of warming. This is, I think this is one of Al Gore's trainees. And this is one of my favorite quotes. John Brignell, one of the 650 international scientists. The warmers are getting more and more like the traditional predictors of the end of the world who, when the event fails to happen on the due date, they announce an error in a calculation and a new due date. And that's exactly what's happening right now. If these trends continue, using their logic on these climate models, you have a couple years of warming temperatures, then they extrapolate. By 2015, we may have to wait until about the year 2500 before warming resumes if these trends of keep delaying the warming keeps coming based on their models. High school kid, shown Al Gore's film 4 times in 4 different classes. 18 years old, it's important, think of that age. If the warming pauses for 30 years until 2038-9, this kid is going to be almost eligible for ARP, the retirement group, by the time warming resumes. That's the new world we're in. And these studies predicting the warming pause are not from skeptics. These are from from man-made global warming believers who are trying to keep their credibility by saying, oh, the warming's in the pipeline. That's what he says. This is lead author Kyle Swanson. He says, 30 years of greenhouse forcing is still there, and then it's going to return and be very aggressive. There you see, this is the warming boogeyman. This is Richard Courtney. I think he's here at this conference. He's talking about the boogeyman. He says, now I understand the boogeyman can't be seen because he's hiding under the bed, but he's going to jump out, the CO2 boogeyman, and be very aggressive. Just wait. You see the hand there about to grab the little kid? Roger Pilkey Sr., former state Colorologist, slapped down Swanson, no other word to use. There's been no heating in the upper oceans. There's been no heating in the troposphere, no warming in the pipeline using that terminology anywhere within the atmosphere. So this idea that there's this big CO2 boogeyman about to jump out is not based on science. This was studied, the 30-year delay study, by, again, believers in man-made global warming, was presented to Senator Debbie Stabenow last week. Her answer was climate change is not just about temperatures going up, it's also about volatility. So now we have global warming is not about warming. That's the new Washington speak. I'm not making this up. Now we have a UN lead author, Susan Solomon, now says that CO2 should be thought of as nuclear waste. CO2. This is an essential trace gas in the atmosphere. Imagine now elementary school kids being taught that CO2, something you exhale from your mouth, is akin to nuclear waste. We had Will Happer, 200-plus peer-reviewed papers from Princeton University, come testify, did a fantastic job against Dr. Pachauri in our Senate committee, drove boxers, people crazy. He declared we're in a CO2 famine, that we are actually at 3-4 times the level we have now. The Earth actually supported life just fine. And Boxer, completely continued to grill him there, but we had a great time. And Dr. Pachauri was frankly overshadowed. We had a success story. Reuters News Service, AFP, several other news outlets led with Dr. Happer's testimony, not the other 3 global warming promoting witnesses that were on the committee. It was a 3-to-1 disadvantage for skeptics, and that's just the odds we like. We like it when we're surrounded because they can't get away. We have to be used to that because it's not going to change. So if we're not having warming now, according to the believers, again, these are just models, but according to them now, we're up to 2039. What do we have to do? We have to keep going further into the future. This is, again, Susan Solomon, CO2 as nuclear waste. She's now come up with a 1,000-year climate prediction. Global, and I'm not making this up. I have a little picture of what the world might look like in the year 3000. She's trying to estimate what sea level will be like. This is the fact they can't estimate sea level from in the year 2000. It's not cooperating now with the models, and they're trying to now predict 3000. The one thing she's done is she's assured that no one's going to be around to check to see if she was accurate or not. But I, for one, am going to try to, if I'm around in the year 3000, I'm bringing a ruler out, and I'm going to try to measure sea level, because she's going to have a lot of answering to do if it has not gone up 1 to 3 feet by the year 3000. That's the other thing. Why pick such a low number for the year 3000? You think it would be like at least 50 feet or 80 feet? I mean, you might as well come up with anything. No one's going to be able to check it. Why not try to scare people more? Who's scared of 1 to 3 feet? As in, I mentioned John Theon, who's in the audience. James Hansen embarrassed NASA with his alarming climate claims. He was never muzzled. Hansen also has been called by believers in warming. Roger Pilkey Jr. Said he was acting like a megalomania when it came to science. And he also, I think Alan Karuba's here actually had a very colorful quote, said, "Get the net. It's time to get the net for Hansen." And you'll see why here when I get a little deeper into this. This is a meteorologist who actually speaks, I think, for the AMS membership. Hansen's politicology has taken over science and renders him no longer qualified to be the keeper of global temperature data. I think that's, I mean, in a serious sense, it's fun to have Hansen out there in the media as much as possible because he's helping skeptics. But on the other hand, he is in charge of a very important job, and there are serious questions. This is sort of a fun, all the hundreds. This is by John Brignell out of Numbers Watch, All the Things Caused by Global Warming. This is one of my favorite. Global warming may make humans work in office blocks modeled on termite nests. This looks like something you'd see on Home and Garden, one of those alternative houses, but apparently that's what we're going to be facing in the future. So be worried, be very worried. Kitten boom, kidney stone risk is one of my favorites. And of course, you have you guys, all the scientists here know this, the demonization. David Suzuki, we need to find a legal way of throwing so-called skeptical leaders into jail because what they're doing is a criminal act. Robert Kennedy Jr. just came out last week at the snowstorm rally, I like to call it the Gore Effect rally in D.C., and said that the coal CEOs should be in jail for eternity. A lot of this, you know, the 52 scientists, the UN has parlayed a 52 scientist summary for policymakers into 2,000, 3,000, whatever the media wants that day. Same with our National Academy of Sciences. Richard Lindzen has written papers, talked about this. Only 24 governing board members pass these statements that are basically in line with the UN. The members never get to vote. The members never get a voice in it, and that's where the scientific blowback is coming from. Great quote, UN, purely political body posing as a scientific institution. And that's the biggest thing. When people cite the UN as an example of global warming, they're insulting your intelligence, and they should be told that. It's a political body, intergovernmental panel. It's even in the name if they can't figure that out. This report we did in the Senate, it's at epw.senate.gov. More than 12 times the numbers of scientists who signed the media-hyped summary for policymakers. This is just another example, a canvas of 50,000 scientists in Canada. 68% disagree that the debate is settled. Only 26 attributed human activity. When you get to rank-and-file scientists, the ones that aren't affiliated with the UN, the ones that aren't getting out front in the media, you get the real story of what's going on behind in the scientific community and what the real consensus is. Great example, I mentioned this earlier, 2/3 overwhelm it. That's actually not a picture of it, but I just liked the picture. It looked like there was a march on the conference there. That's not actually the scientists there, but. What I like to do to keep it simple, especially for Washington policymakers, Earth currently well within natural variability, climate fair generated by unproven computer models, which even the UN admits aren't accurate, and forecasting experts like Scott Armstrong, who's here, said they violate the basic principles of forecasting. Abundance of peer-reviewed study debunking rising CO2 fares, and we're having a whole collection of that, which we'll be releasing. Consensus had been manufactured for political, not scientific purposes. These are some of the new names that have been added this year. Sky's Not Burning, chemist from Naval Academy, journalistic malpractice, and I think that pretty much sums up most of the media's efforts on global warming. Much the same way, by the way, they did Amazon rainforest and other rainforest issues back in the 90s when that was the big issue. You had Sting's rainforest concert. New York Times, 10 years later, finally admits for every acre of rainforest cut, 50 are growing back. The rainforests are returning to nature as people are moving from the jungles to settlement in the cities. Imagine that. People don't want to live in mud huts, living in jungles, and They actually want to move into cities, and that's what's happening right now. I like this quote. This is from David Bellamy, who did believe in global warming, reversed himself. The science has quite simply gone awry. And if anything, that should be the slogan we tell all the media. The science has quite simply gone awry. There's no better, simple statement than that. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is the Gore effect, the largest global warming protest in the history of Washington in a half a foot of snow in March. Great fun. There's some of the headlines. My favorite is at the bottom, Pelosi snowed out of DC global warming rally. Not made up. That's a real headline. And it's a real fact. It really happened. Okay, now the real reason, the global warming solutions. You may have seen all these quotes, but they're important to get back out here. Kyoto represents the first component of an authentic global governance, Jacques Chirac. Kyoto is about the economy, about leveling the playing field for big business worldwide. Does it sound like anyone's trying to solve global warming here? Colorado Senator Timothy Ward. This is why arguing with people about science, they always run away. I'm sure almost everyone in this room has probably heard this. Even if we're wrong, we're doing right by policy. It doesn't matter about the science. If it doesn't matter about the science, why are they giving out Nobel Prizes? Why are they giving out Oscars? Why is Al Gore's film being shown in schools? The science matters, but this shows you that this is a political movement at its heart, not scientific. I was at the Bali UN conference. They're urging a global tax. Wealthy nations. Guess what? The U.S. would bear the biggest burden. And guess who would administer the funds under this proposal? Yes, the United Nations. This is just an idea of the cost. These are recent tax increases in the U.S. going back to 1968. This is what Kyoto is son of Kyoto. These are the kind of numbers it would cost if we ever actually go into it, which is, a prospect. Interesting, though, the people screaming the loudest, James Lovelock of the UK, who believes there's only going to be a few breeding couples left in the Arctic because global warming's so bad, is laughing at the solutions, laughs at Kyoto, laughs at congressional cap and trade. If the people really believed the global warming was so bad, why not listen to the people raising the alarm? He calls it a gigantic scam, all this carbon trading that's going on. Even James Hansen has his moments of lucidity. He's called cap and trade ineffectual and doesn't understand why that's the approach that Congress is going for, because it's not going to have any impact. My favorite quote from Richard Lindzen: controlling carbon is a bureaucrat's dream. If you control carbon, you control life. And this was during the Bali UN conference. Climate change must have at its heart a redistribution of wealth and resources. And that's, again, does any of this sound like science? All economic pain, no climate gain. Again, this is if Kyoto were fully implemented, which is not being. This is assuming they're right on the science, which they're not. But even assuming that, you wouldn't even have a detectable impact on climate. But they will have higher energy costs and economic harm to struggling citizens. One of the things you always hear on Capitol Hill is, well, what if you're wrong? We need an insurance policy. That's why we have to do cap and trade. Well, I always ask, would you buy an insurance policy on your home that had a huge upfront premium and virtually no payout? That's not any kind of insurance policy anyone would sell, and you'd probably be investigated for fraudulent advertising. That's what cap and trade is. No impact on the climate. If anyone says we need insurance policy, we need to do something, why would you do something that would have no impact? Because it's not about the science. This is the really sad. This is where Al Gore is right. It is a moral issue. It's a moral issue about the solutions. People can't cook. This just happened in January. Chad's government banned charcoal because of global warming concerns. People were desperate. They couldn't cook. They couldn't heat. They're having a huge problem there. This is one of my favorites. Black clergyman protested Robert Redford, linked his environmentalism to racism. He's against drilling. He's for all these global warming solutions. He's going to hurt people of color the most. That's why the black preachers were out there. He's going to raise energy prices on people to do absolutely nothing for the climate. There's another one, buy local, hurt poor African farmers. A UK grocery store was going to try to have a carbon-friendly policy of buying local, and the Kenyans protested because that meant they wouldn't get their livelihoods of exporting food would dry up. This is the unintended consequences, or some would say the intended consequences. Gore says he can't understand why young people aren't bulldozing and preventing construction of coal-fired plants. This is James Hansen. I put a Superman cartoon. For Bizarro World is like the opposite world of, in the Superman comics. James Hansen says that trains carrying coal to power plants are death trains. Coal-fired plants are factories of death. Think about that. 53% of our electricity. Reality check. Carbon-based energy, one of the greatest liberators of mankind in the history of our planet. Life used to be nasty, brutish, and short before those trains of death and other carbon-based energy delivered us from it. So if anything, they're trains of life, they're factories of life. James Hansen couldn't be more opposite and more bizarro world on this issue. Carbon-based energy allowed unprecedented 20th century advances, everything from lower infant mortality, longer life expectancy, defibrillators, modern dentistry, you name it, it has brought running water, electricity to the world. And the developing world is poised to make the same kind of gains that the developed world did from the 20th century, unless these unfounded climate fears, unless they start tearing down ancient forests to plant eucalyptus trees, as we heard Larry Solomon talking about earlier today, or they're paying these African, you could pay them corrupt dictators not to develop their land so that they can keep it unspoiled while people live and die nasty, brutish, and short lives. And this is one of my favorite lines. If the Earth was truly facing a climate crisis and the proposal of the UN and Congress were our only hope, we would all be doomed. In 2 decades, not a single credible proposal would have any detectable impact on temperatures, yet they keep proposing them as though there's some kind of solution. Someone's got to call them on it, and we need to do it fast. The public is with us. Skepticism, 20 out of 20. Rank, Rasmussen, 51%, if you include all the undecideds, believe they're not the predominant cause. And other polling data, Gallup polls, no change in concern from 1989 to 1998. The public is where they need to be. We just need to get the leaders now to follow this, follow science. And this is my last note of pessimism. Never underestimate the ability of Congress to offer non-solutions to problems that don't exist. That's probably what Congress is best at, and it's going to be hard to prevent that. And then again, we're at epw.senate.gov. That's Senator Inhofe. And I'll get into more of the Outlook stuff during the Q&A, but I think my time's up here, so I'll hand it over to Chris Horner now.